Hello, it's time to pick books for the month of August. I can't wait to do it. My name's Nicole. We're going to play a TBR game and it's all going to be a good time. So I have decided to do things slightly differently, which I may just mean more complicated or in a more complicated fashion. But anyway, I'm participating in HRCYED 3.0. And so I've figured out kind of sort of a way to combine that into my TBR game, but also pick other books for some other reading plans that I want to work on and another challenge that I've added to all the challenges I'm doing this year. Just stay with me, it'll all make sense. So off screen, I've already gone ahead and shuffled some of the HRCYED prompts to decide which one prompt I'm going to focus on for this month. And I came up with choose your curriculum, which is good because in the month of July, I already knocked one book off of this. So if you're not familiar with HRCYED, all the prompts have like other prompts within the prompt, if you will, or each prompt off the bingo board has like sub prompts. So I'm going to be working on all the sub prompts for choose your curriculum. So what I've done is I've gone ahead, I have my bingo board set up per usual, Unipiggy's ready to go, and he's going to select a random letter for me, and then he's also going to select a random sub prompt from choose your own curriculum. And in HRCYED, this prompt means that you need to choose a book that would, fit each of a particular course that you might take in high school and college. So like philosophy or physics or chemistry or math or English or history or that kind of thing. So I've put like class subjects in as the prompts that Unipiggy will pick. He's going to choose a letter, which needs to be the title of the book I'm going to read and whatever subject that book needs to be on. Now, it doesn't need to be nonfiction for HRCYED. It can just be something that implies it. So if I got art, I would need to pick a book whose title starts with the letter S and in some way is about art. And for that, I can already think of a book, which would be Saving Grace, which is a book about Vincent van Gogh's artwork and his sister. And it's all about art and art gallery and that kind of thing. And so that would work for art class. But that's not what the first book is going to be. I need to choose three different subjects. And so I'm going to my first three books. Those are what it's going to be. I'm going to play this until I get a bingo. But obviously, since I only need 3 books for HRCYED, after that, I'm going to switch the prompts to something else. We'll talk about that when we get to it. For now, let's go ahead and see what the first book is going to be. Philosophy. Oh, I have the perfect book for this, oddly enough. The wheels came off. The wheels are coming off. The wheels came off, like as in literal wheels. So my laptop is resting on my TBR cart and the actual wheel came off it. So if I suddenly go, whoa, it's because everything's falling. Anyway, let's just go ahead with the prompt. I did have a book that I knew would work for this prompt, and that's helpful. And the book that I chose is Sophie's World. This is a work of philosophical fiction. I'm pretty sure I have some other books whose title also start with S that would work for this prompt, but this one was the first one that popped in my head and I do want to give it a try. I'm looking forward to this book. This is something that I'm pretty sure I read in high school, so this will be a reread for me, but I read it so long ago, I literally could tell you nothing about this book other than I vaguely recall it being philosophical fiction, which I may have remembered at some other point in life, and that it's about a girl named Sophie. So after having bought the book and reread the back and that kind of thing, she's 14 and I think she's a kind of loner, if I recall. But then she starts getting mysterious messages that sort of help her into the world of philosophy and start thinking about the meaning of life and all those kinds of things. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of really interesting philosophical questions being asked and maybe attempted to be answered by her. But either way, I just like thinking about it. So I thought this would be a great pick. It definitely would be a book that I feel like if you were being introduced to philosophy in high school or late middle school, that this would be a class, not that you would take at either of those ages, but a book that could be taught to those ages. So whatever, I feel like it definitely works for the prompt, so I'm going with it. All right, we're back at Unipiggy, and I'm realizing that the letter S came up again, and I definitely didn't pay attention. So I'm going to assume that he actually switched letters, but I'll watch him this time. Okay, let me go with book number 2. He's liking the letter S. I swear there are significantly more letters on the list than that, but let's see if I can get him to choose a different letter. I mean, I guess I don't need him to choose a different letter. Well, yes, I do, because I need to get a bingo. Okay, choose a different letter. Get it together. The letter C. Oh, for shop? Why did I include this in there? Okay, this is like shop, technology, woodworking, that kind of thing. We'll see. Continuing to work on the same choose your own curriculum prompt, I got shop. So, like shop technology, mechanical engineering, whatever version you have of that typically in high school, or at least we used to have something like that. We had two different versions of shop, actually in middle school that we were all required to take. One had to do with woodworking and the other had to do with like metals and that kind of thing. And I remember building like a record player that I swore if you upsized and took out the needle would work as a public park treadmill. It was an interesting idea. Would that actually ever work? I don't know, but it sounded cool and my teacher liked it. So let's talk about the book that I picked. I found one book and I'm just realizing I forgot to do a unicorn pick over at my desk. So we'll just do it here. But let's first talk about the book that I did find, and that is Chevengur. I'm not sure yet if that's how you say the name of the book. I will find out eventually, but that's how I'm going to say it for now. This is supposed to be a revolutionary book about revolutionary ardor and despair. And I know that the protagonist is a train mechanic and that it's more or less so about the industrial age, at least at the beginning. Where does it describe it? That the protagonist, he's motivated by his belief in the transformative power of industry. And to me, when I think about shop and tech class, especially the one that I took in middle school, I feel like it's all looking at least half of it was looking at the industrial era and just working with metals and wood and that kind of thing. And we definitely focused on like technology and the things that you could mechanically build at that time. And so, yeah, I feel like this book kind of fits that vibe, at least initially. Would this be taught in a shop class? No, but that's not what the prompt is, so we're going to go with it. Now, I did realize that I forgot to do a unicorn pick over there, so we're just going to do it on the fly right now. This is the book. So my unicorn picks are when things don't match up. I couldn't find a second book that started with the letter, C, and is related to shop. So this probably will not fit this prompt on HRCYED, but it's just going to be another book that I could potentially read this month. And that is Oh, 15 dogs. Oh, and I don't know why I'm thinking I'm going to go get the book. All of these are books that are on my unowned TBR. So 15 Dogs is a book that I can get from my library. This is a book that I decided I might want to read based on what? It's almost always based on some other book that I've read. So let me pull up a description on my phone and I'll tell you about it. Okay, so this is a work of fantasy, and I'm just realizing it says it's book two in a series. I'm going to have to check and make sure that I don't need to read book one first. If I do, I'll read book one first, but otherwise, I think they might just be in the same universe or same collection of ideas. But this is 15 Dogs by Andrey Alexis, and this is a work of fantasy as it's described, and I don't think it's a retelling, but it definitely has to do with, the ancient gods, Hermes and Apollo. And basically, what happens is they have a bet together, and that leads them to grant human consciousness and language to a group of dogs who are overnighting at a Toronto veterinarian clinic. The dogs then now have the capability to reason and have complex thought, and the pack of dogs then have to decide and discuss amongst themselves whether they want to explore their new ways of thinking or stick to their old dog ways. I don't know why, but this just sounds really fascinating to me. And I like reading books about like what is sentience and like what happens to different things when they become sentient. And I know I've been reading some books lately that were addressing the idea of, do we limit the idea of what has sentience just to what has a language that we can share and that kind of thing. And I feel like this gets into all those ideas anyway. I want to read about 15 dogs at a veterinarian clinic who now are capable of complex thought and I can understand them. So there's that. And again, if I find out that I have to read book one in this, I will read book one. I don't know what that is, but you'll find out about it later this month if I pick it up. All right. For the third pick, which will at this point be the fourth book, let's do Unipiggy again and see what comes up. J for music. Okay. We didn't really think we were going to get away with no unicorn picks, did we? I mean, I was hoping. I was hoping at least for the HRCYED prompts, but no such luck. So when I can't match a letter and a prompt, it's a unicorn pick, which means I pick out of my unicorn jar. Here he is. And he is still full of all the books that are on my unowned TBR. I did that last month and I liked the idea, even though I didn't end up getting to any of those books. Let's see if that happens this time. What is the book? Where can I get it from? The Secret History. Well, isn't that interesting? Um, I'll be honest. In all fairness, even though you're not going to see me talk about this book until this month, I'm actually currently in the middle of reading The Secret History. I could have not told you that and just been like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. But I'm going to be honest and fair with you. So I'll choose another book. I don't mind doing so. And then, how is that in there? Because that's definitely not on my unowned TBR. I own The Secret History. I don't know. We're not going to spend too long thinking about it. Okay. This one I do not own, and this is Ultra 85. I don't know if it's going to focus. And in the parentheses, it says local because I can buy this book at my local bookstore. So that is the first pick because I did not find a single book that was about music or a musician or anything tangentially related to music that would come up frequently enough in the book. Now, I could have gone with like some sort of music thing on the cover that also did not exist. I only have like 5 books whose titles start with the letter J, and one of them is The Jungle. So there's that. And we'll talk about what these books are in a second. This book I can see I can get from my library, and it's an invitation to a, is it a murder? I'll look it up. Why I don't write the full title on here so that I'll know, I don't know that either. Like maybe it's an invitation to a mystery, an invitation to my mind. I vaguely recall the book. I have it saved on the Storygraph, so I will be able to find out what the full title is. But for now, let's like move over to the couch and I'll talk about them over there. Okay, so let's talk about the 2 books. I'm going to start by talking about Ultra 85. This is by Logic and is a book that I can pick up at my local bookstore. And apparently it's their highly anticipated second novel. I've never heard of this author, so I don't even know what their first novel is. But it's set in the far future in 2115, and 2 friends have uncovered the utopian planet Paradise, and they want to see if it lives up to its name. So it's described on the Storygraph as saying in 2000 or 2115, when the Earth is no longer inhabitable, the remainder of humanity lives in Babel, a giant space station. 2 pilots, Quentin and Kai, must find the planet Paradise where only the most promising citizens are allowed to live. On their journey, they encounter Quentin's estranged father, who left Babel for Paradise when Quentin was a child, and they discover just how different Paradise is from what they imagined, and how they must change it for the better. And I always like the idea of utopian stories, because if you don't know, like people try to write utopians, and they never end up being utopians, and so most utopians end up being about dystopian places. We can like imagine all the reasons that might be. So this sounds like a really just unique story, at least to me. I mean, not in the sense that people have written about people trying to get to utopia and not making it, but whatever. We're going to go with it. I like that premise. I definitely want to read this book and I'm looking forward to it. But I still have one more to talk to you about, and that is an invitation to something, to a beheading. I was getting closer. This is by Vladimir Nabakov, and you might be like, Nicole, why do you want to read these books? You know, these are the books that I'm exploring, that I'm interested in reading, and this is a work that I can get from my library, so that's nice. According to the Storygraph, this is nightmarish, witty, and immaculately conceived, and it unsparingly teases out the ill logic of tyranny and will establish Nabokov in the reader's mind as a serious and intelligent writer, I'm imagining, as opposed to just the writer of Lolita. And this is written in Berlin in 1934, contains all the surprise, excitement, and magical intensity of a work created in 2 brief weeks of sustained inspiration. I think I do recall hearing that about this book, was that he literally just sat down and wrote it. Takes us into the fascinating prison world where a man is condemned to death and spending his last days in prison not quite knowing when the end will come. So that's the invitation to a beheading, because I'm assuming that's how he's going to be executed. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a really fascinating character study, though I'm also hoping that we're not trapped in his prison cell in his mind, but we probably are. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Well, we'll figure out how that HRCYED prompt's going to go later this month when I actually work on the hardest reading challenge for a week. In the meantime, I don't have a bingo yet, and I do need to keep picking books. So I'm going to continue to play this game until I get a bingo. Now, the rest of the prompts that are going to come up are going to be all really random, and I will talk about what they mean when I pick the book, and I'll explain both to you at the same time. But just know that they're related to another challenge that I'm doing that I will talk about later in the month. But for now, we're just going to play the game and move forward with things as they are, I guess. Okay, so let's have Unipiggy get to work. I wasn't sure if he was done. Okay, F has an adaptation. All right. Sounds good. I can do this. All right, so now we're getting into the other prompts. The first one here has to just do with adaptations. I have a lot of books that have movie adaptations and other types of adaptations. I'm mainly going to be focusing on the ones that have movie or television adaptations. I like watching adaptations of books that I've read, but I just don't do it frequently. And so I'm hoping to start doing that more often. And for this prompt, it's going to have me start out with Anne-Marie MacDonald's book, Fall on Your Knees. I have read this book before, but quite a while ago, again, when I was in high school. And I recently read a more recent work of hers, which was Fane, and loved it. And it reminded me of how much I did like this book. And I had actually owned a used edition of it at one point and thought about rereading it, but then just felt like, oh, when would I ever get back to that? It's historical fiction. I didn't think I'd really like it. But since then, I'm like, no, what am I thinking? I do actually really like her writing. I recall really enjoying the book. It's a multi-generational family saga, if I recall correctly. My edition only has blurbs on the back, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's definitely a family story, if nothing else. And I recall it being really heart-moving and just really enjoying the book. So I think she talks about and writes stories about family really well in a way that I don't know if I would always say enjoy, because I feel like they're frequently sad, but in a way that just feels appropriate, and I just enjoy her books as a whole. So I'm looking forward to this reread, which almost kind of sort of surprises me. And if I love it as much as I think I'm going to, I'll probably eventually get a different edition, but this is an edition that I found really cheap and used, and it's really weird. I don't know if this is a adaptation tie-in, but this does have a TV series that was made off of it. And I did look and check and make sure I would actually be able to rent it somewhere. So my plan is that if I read that book, that I'll also watch the adaptation, like this month, not one day eventually, which is how I usually do the adaptations. So trying to change that because I do like a good adaptation. All right, let's keep things moving. P, a century you haven't picked from. So I have all my books so far, and now I need to pick a book that does not occur and was not originally published in any of the other centuries I've picked from so far. Good luck, me. All right, I wasn't sure how tricky this was going to be because I wasn't really paying attention to what centuries the books I were picking were written in. And it turns out pretty much all of them were written in the 20th century. And I was hoping that was going to be the case. I was like, please don't have something in the 21st century because it would be nice to pick something from that. And sure enough, they were all in 20th century. So I did pick a book that was written in the 21st century, and that is The Parisians. This is written by Isabella. I was about to call her Isabella. well, but it's Isabella Hammad. And this is a book that I've owned for a little while. In fact, it's pretty much a TBR vet for me at this point. It's at the very least been on my TBR as a book I've wanted to read for a long time. But earlier this year, I became a lot more interested in the book after finishing the Cairo trilogy series. That's a book that is about a family living in Egypt. And during the second and third book, it talks about the experience of some of these Egyptian family members in the early 1900s going off specifically to Paris and then coming back home and how that changed them and that kind of thing. And when I read that, it reminded me of this book. This book has a fairly similar premise. It is about a young man who goes off from Palestine during World War I to France, and specifically, I believe, to Paris. And he goes there to, well, yeah, it's called the Parisian. Like, where else was he going in France? I don't know what I was thinking there. But he goes off to study there during World War I and eventually comes back home to Palestine. And it's about his experience of like re-encountering his friends and family and just sort of the adaptation that he and they have to make, is my understanding. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be really interesting to read more about just people during that time period going to Paris, which was kind of like the place to go and learn and be during the early 1900s, and then seeing that adaptation and those changes that happen when you come back home. Because it doesn't matter what era or what century you go traveling to a foreign country, going and living outside your home country for a time and then coming back is an experience that seems to always change people. And I really would like to read about that. And I think it's interesting to read about that from different points of view than what would be my own. Okay, let's see what's gonna happen next. I'm getting nervous, partially because I have the potential of two bingos, but they have totally different numbers. I mean letters. So the chances of my getting these two bingos that seem to be happening is pretty slim. Okay, the letter M, an underhyped book. This could mean so many different things, but I have an idea of what I mean. So let me see what I can find. All right, for underhyped, I have a lot of books that when I haul, people mention, like, I've never heard of some of these books, and that's not necessarily intentional on my part. I just know that the most hyped books aren't always in genres or have premises that I'm particularly interested in. And so when I go to bookstores, I don't necessarily look for the most hyped books. I often frequently will just walk up to a shelf of books and I will look at every single book that is on that shelf. And I'm pretty sure that's how I found this book, which is my therapist says this grief journal is a good idea. And I did take a moment to look up on the Storygraph and Goodreads what the reviews were and that kind of thing. So on the Storygraph, this book has only been reviewed by 6 people, and it has a star rating of 4.19, which I feel like is still pretty good for only 6 people. That means all of them gave it probably somewhere in the fours. I didn't check that part though, but averages. And I did also take a moment to look this up on Goodreads. On Goodreads, this only has 13 reviews and it has a 4.24. Now, this did just come out in 2025. And if you're like me, people buy books and they put them on their shelves to let them sit and marinate and age like a fine wine. So maybe that's what's going on with this book. But needless to say, a lot of people haven't read it. This book, in my mind, is going to be what I wanted Catcher in the Rye to be. It is also about a young man who is growing up. He has experienced a major tragedy in his immediate family, and it is told in the first person. He's supposed to be very witty, quirky, interesting, very strong character voice, and he is sharing through a series of journals with his therapist or maybe to himself about his experience. And yeah, a lot of that in this description just reminded me of Holden Caulfield. And so I'm hoping that there's going to be those similarities, but that I'm going to like this book a lot better than I did Catcher in the Rye. So I don't know about you, but every now and then when I come across a book that reminds me of a book that I didn't like, but I liked the premise of, I will try the new book in hopes that I'll like it better. That's what's going on here. So yeah, let me know if you've heard of this book because it seems like very few people have. This board is working on giving me bingos in all sorts of different ways, so I really have no idea like which way the bingo is going to go. And the reason that usually becomes important is because those tend to be the books that I focus on. I'm going to focus on the books that I chose for the HRCYED prompt no matter what, but the rest of the bingo line is going to determine a few other things as well. Let me keep going and see what happens next. The letter I. Okay, I already got a century I have picked from, and I don't want to have repeat prompts, so let me keep going. The letter O, written by a superstar author. Okay, wait, no, I'm just realizing I can repeat that last prompt. So let's go back to I. Sorry. I don't even know how to play my own game. Okay, we're gonna pretend that I didn't make that mistake, and we're gonna go back to I. So it's gonna be another other century that I haven't picked from yet. Hopefully there's some left. All right, we're back over here. Um, yeah, so I found two books, two of the four that I needed, whose titles start with letter I, and I haven't picked books from the century yet. So we'll talk about what those two are in a second, but I could not find two more off that I shelf. I don't have a lot of books whose titles start with I, maybe 10 total. Most of them were from the 20th century, and I had already picked that earlier, so that didn't even count as one of the picks. So we're back to the unicorn again, pulling two more books out of here. Let's reach in deep and see what comes up. Ooh, all of them. All of them are going to come up. Another book I can get from my library. This one is, oh, it's like 10,000 things. It's a long title, if I remember correctly. Okay, at least I partially recall that book. Another pick. Let's see what this one is. Why is this one hard to open? Okay, another book I can buy locally. Oh, this is a newer release. Is it even out yet? Old to the half, born to the half something. Maybe it's more entertaining that I don't have the whole title and clearly don't remember them. But I do know that it is a science fiction that has just come out. It sounds like it's going to be like heartwarming, but sad and touching. I know there's like some sort of robot involved. Let me find the title, and that way I'll be able to find what the book is about, and I'll see you over on the couch. We'll start out by talking about the first two books that I picked that were from different centuries. So far, as I've mentioned, I have the 21st and the 20th century covered. I was hoping to find a book that would cover the 19th century, and I was able to do that. And that's Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, written by Harriet Jacobs. And this is described as being a landmark of American history and literature. It recounts the incredible but true story of Harriet Jacobs, born a slave in North Carolina in 1813. And her tale gains its importance from her description in the great and painful detail of the exploitation of her daily of the exploitation that daily haunted her life. And I've heard good things about this. I think it's going to be a really hard read because she is sexually exploited, but that is something that comes up a lot in slave narratives, especially in related to women. And so I think it's important to read and know about that and understand that. And so, yeah, it's also a work from the 19th century. So I don't know if looking forward to reading it is the right phrase, and I say that way too often anyway, but I've been wanting to get to this book, and I feel like it's good timing to do that, especially since I recently read Uncle Tom's Cabin and Uncle Tom's Children. I feel like just reading more about the slave experience is appropriate for this point in my reading life. So this will be the next work that I hopefully get to. And then I also had another work. This one is from the 18th century. And for a second I was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, but it just eked in. I think it was like published in 1796, something like that. So I just barely made it, with The Italian by Anne Radcliffe. So I have read The Romance of the Forest by Anne Radcliffe, and I really enjoyed that book. I'm hoping I'll like The Italian. I don't know. It's in the Gothic vibe, and Anne Radcliffe is basically the mother of Gothic novels, I would think. And yeah, it is about a young girl who I'm thinking of The Mysteries of Udolpho. Let me read the back because I could not. Before it even came out, I could tell I was about to describe the wrong book. So it says, Father Scadoni is enlisted by the imperious Marchesa di Vivaldi to prevent her son from marrying the beautiful Elena. Scadoni has no scruples in kidnapping Elena and undertaking whatever villainy will further his ends. And thus begins every Gothic novel. Now, if this is anything like The Romance of the Forest, I'm thinking that there is going to be some chase and some pursuit, a lot of drama, some castles, some grueling places, an evil, evil villain, and hopefully a good and overly somewhat melodramatic time. I don't know. I kind of like that sometimes in books, especially in classics. I think they do it well and it's like enjoyable. I don't know. They're kind of like the 18th century thriller. It's as close as I get to one anyway. So we'll see how this goes and if it actually ends up being read this month. So then I had the 2 unicorn picks. So let me pull those up and tell you about those. Okay, the first one that I pulled was the 10K is what I wrote on my piece of paper, but it's the 10,000 Things, and per usual, I'll put a picture of it up on the screen so you can see what the book looks like. It's apparently put out by New York Review Press, and let's see how it's described on the story graph. The 10,000 Things is at once a novel of shimmering strangeness and familiarity. It is a story of Felicia who returns with her baby son from Holland to the Spice Islands of Indonesia, to the house and garden that were her birthplace, over which her powerful grandmother still presides. There, Felicia finds herself wedded to an uncanny and dangerous world full of mystery and violence where objects tell tales, the dead come and go, and the past is as potent as the present. Now, this is another book that, for the life of me, I couldn't tell you how this ended up on my TBR, but it sounds really good and sounds really like mysterious and interesting. It's definitely supposed to have magical realism in it, as even that passing mention of the dead coming and going would imply. And New York Review Books, I feel like, puts out some pretty good translated works, and I do believe that this work is translated. Yes, it is. So yeah, we'll see how this one goes. Now, let me pull up the other one, which was, what is it? Ode to the Robot, Ode to the Half-Broken. Never gonna guess what the end of these titles are. I should just force myself to read whatever book is actually closest to the title that I'm guessing. Now, this is a book that was published in 2026. It is a work of science fiction, and I have that I can get it from my library. I'm probably going to have to put that on hold today. So it's described as saying 40 years ago, the world nearly ended. B is an old robot who was there and doesn't want to think about what happened or what role they played in that conflict. They have settled into a life of isolation in the abandoned ruins of an old mill in the former New York Botanical Gardens. Disinterested in what has happened in the outside world since they stepped away from the war, someone out there, though, has not forgotten about them, and when they are attacked, their person vandalized, and one of their legs stolen, they set out to find the thief, accompanied by a cyborg dog and a human mechanic. So this definitely has vibes of found family, and I like the idea of like not wanting to be involved with the rest of the world. I'm thinking that there's going to be like some isolation and friendship going on, as well as like going out in the world and maybe being surprised by what you find. I don't know. I think it's going to be definitely a compassionate story and hopefully not too sentimental or too sad, but there's only one way to find out. Well, mistakes were made there. Definitely should have just switched to a different prompt, but I would have been messed up no matter what, given that there's 4 eyes on the bingo board. Now, last month, I did the bingo and like I didn't have repeat letters on there, but I don't know. I kind of feel like the repeat letters are kind of fun, especially because I've never bothered to look and see what letters have repeated. So it's a surprise to me every single time. Anyway, let me click Unipiggy, see what comes up next. The letter K, and it needs to be a book off of my 500 women list. Okay, hopefully I have something. Ooh, okay, I know what it should be on that list. Oh, it's a long book though. All right. So for the last book, let me explain, first of all, where this sort of 500 women list is coming from. I bought a book a couple of summers ago called 500 Great Books by Women, and I have been wanting to work through this book. So I'm going to be a little bit more intentional by keeping it in the back of my mind. And I want to start out by at least reading the books that are listed in here that I own. So in this case, I needed to read one whose title starts with the letter K. And I knew what book I had that starts with the letter K and is written by a woman. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be in that book, but it was. And that book is Kristin Lavransdatter. So this is a mammoth book. So even if I pick it up this month, I highly doubt I'm going to finish it because yeah, it's over 1,000 pages long. Do I recall anything about what this book is about at this point? No, not really. I've owned it for a while. I do know that it's really popular. A lot of people seem to really like it. It is about a young girl growing up in the 14th century, and I think things get romantically rather complicated for her. Yeah, she's deeply devoted to her father. A student in a convent school, she meets the charming, impetuous Erilyn. She defies her parents in a stubborn pursuit of her own desires. I do recall that I think she's supposed to be a very strong female character. And there's some other book that this is compared to, but for the life of me, I can't imagine what book that is anymore. It is a mammoth. It's supposed to be a mammoth that is worth your time. So we'll see if I think so after reading it, but I'm excited about it. It is the last book. It is the book I got a bingo with, and so it's probably going to be a book that I do try prioritizing this month. I just don't know that I'll finish it this month. So let's go back and look at what the plans are for my reading for this month so far, based on my game, based on the bingo, based on all the things. Okay, so let's start with the HRCYED prompts. I got the Choose Your Curriculum. I was only able to find 2 of the 3 books that I need to finish choosing my curriculum. One was going to be for the sub-prompt of philosophy. I'm going to use Sophie's World, and another subject is going to be shop. For that, I'm going to use Chevengur. And then if I somehow make it through these books this month, I will need to pick one more book to finish off the prompt Choose Your Curriculum. And that's probably going to be like a music related book or art related book or something like that, because you can do extracurriculars. So I'll probably choose one for that, and I'll probably choose one that's short. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to do what I did last month, and I'm just going to spend 1 week during the month of August trying to work on and finish these books. It might take me a little bit longer than that, but you'll probably just see one video where I talk about working on these books and hopefully getting through them. But probably what it'll be is working on one of these books and getting through whatever the shorter book is. But we'll just see how that all works out. But that's the plan for that. So, subscribe and ring the bell if you want to see that video coming up and be notified and all that jazz. All right, moving on. What are the other definite plans? Okay, so I am working on something else, and the 3 things that these other books are going to have me focusing on is 1, adaptations. So for that, it would be Fall on Your Knees by Anne-Marie MacDonald. So hopefully I will get to this book as well and be able to watch the adaptation of that. That would be really fun. Quite a few of the books that I have on this list all work for centuries, or are published in different centuries. So I will be trying to focus on that. What were the books for that? Here they are. These 3 books. So I have one from the 18th, 19th, and 21st century, as well as the 20th century. Nope, not that one. Well, one of these other ones would also work for the 21st century. And I'd have to look it up, but I'm not sure when Kristin Lavransdatter was published, but I feel like it's probably the 19th century. Anyway, for the other project I have that I'm working on, I do need to read books from multiple different centuries. So these would be the 3 that I would be working on when I try and accomplish that. And then finally, I do have the goal that I mentioned of trying to read books out of this book, The 500 Women, and Kristin Lavransdatter and Sigrid Undset would be the first book that would count towards that. And honestly, that covers all the books on this TBR except for this one, which would just be a random read that I might pick up if I feel like it. And honestly, I do feel like reading this book sometime soon, and it's one of the shortest ones. that has made it onto this TBR. So I may be reading it sooner than later. We'll see how that goes. So that is it. Let me show you the whole stack of books, which is pretty thick. Like, I feel like this is one of my shorter TBR stacks in terms of it doesn't have as many books on it, but I also feel like it's one of the longest ones in terms of all of the books seeming like they're 400 pages or significantly more. Here's what it looks like. You tell me what you think. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if there's any of them that you would suggest, or if you're participating in the hardest reading challenge and what you would do for the prompt. Choose your curriculum. That's it from me today. I hope we all have a great reading month. I can't wait to get started on these books, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.